father once said, though the dragon clan is an untouchable race on Dragon Island, they have also granted wishes before. These are the thoughts of a young girl with sparkling light blue eyes like the ocean, holding a doll tight to her chest. If that's the case, without hesitation she clasps her hands together and makes her wish to the dragon statue. She wishes for her father to come back and for the dragon to protect her like her father used to. And lastly, to take away her divine power. Her eyes flutter open softly, as if she were waking from a dream, and to her surprise, the first thing she sees is a tiny baby dragon gazing straight into her eyes. 10 years later, guests walking down a narrow path grumble in frustration, questioning how much farther it is to the old man's dwelling. They hissed in annoyance, calling her cursed that even something as simple as getting married is such a hassle. Meanwhile, the girl remains gracefully composed throughout the ride, her expression near unreadable. Her eyes are dark and gloomy, as she recalls the words that linger in her mind. Don't worry, dear sister, the old lord might be a bit used and unattractive, but he's very generous to you. Just look, he's had 7 wives before, yet he's still willing to take you as his 8th, what a blessing this is for you. But she didn't respond to her sister's taunts. Instead, she shut her eyes tightly, reliving the incident from before. She went after her mother, trying to speak with her, but her mother coldly pulled her hand away before she could reach it. Meeting her gaze, her mother told her they had fought so hard to gain everything they had, so she should be grateful, calling her Pearl. But she refused with all her strength, snapping that she was only 17 while the man was already in his 50s, but her words fell on deaf ears. Her father instead coldly told her to shut up, demanding to know what right she had to complain. He told her she had always been nothing but a burden, and just as he raised his hand to strike her, another hand caught his. She shivered, eyes pressed shut as she braced for the painful blow, and when it never came, she slowly opened her eyes. Her mother held his hand back and firmly reminded him that her face was the only reason they were getting such a high price. She then glanced at her and remarked that it was a fair deal. After that, she said they would leave the next day, ordering that if she refused, she should be tied up and thrown into the carriage. But with a painful smile and the bitter realization that she had no choice, she cut in, saying she would go on her own. Back in the present, purplish flames spread around them, and her maid shrieks in terror. The maid searches for a way out, crying that she doesn't want to die there, while Pearl only sits still, her words cutting harshly. They curse that she should just die already, that she should burn to death in her own flames, calling her a cursed witch. But as the maid hurries away from the carriage, they soon encounter something even more terrifying, a dragon hovering above them, circling like it was scouting for its prey. Panic flashes in Pearl's eyes the moment she looks out the window. She rushes to the door, trying desperately to open it, but it's locked from the outside, sealed to keep her from escaping the marriage. Her fear steadies when an idea strikes. She realizes she could use fire. But before she can act, she freezes as the massive eyes of the dragon peer directly at her through the window. The dragon's voice, steady and clear, throws her into confusion as it calls her its bride. In an instant, it smashes through the window between them, and from the impact she faints, her body left hanging halfway out. Tears stream down her face as she drifts slowly into deep thought. Children her age gathered around after snatching her doll. One boy with brown hair leaned forward, mocking her, asking what it mattered even if it was hers, and reminding her that she only entered their family because her low-born mother had slept her way in. The others circled her, each calling her a little slave, all of it watched silently by a small dragon above. The dragon turned to leave, but the brown-haired boy noticed its presence. A smirk crossed his face as he suddenly threw a rock at it. To the dragon's shock, its body froze, it was suddenly unable to move. It took only a minute for the dragon to realize that it was no ordinary rock, rather, it was the Grand Mage's binding stone. In that moment of vulnerability, a pair of hands reached out and pulled him into a warm embrace. She was momentarily distracted by how beautiful his eyes were until a voice snapped her back to reality, asking if she was really that happy, pointing out that she couldn't even protect herself, yet was worrying about others. The girl then suddenly announced that she had a great idea and pulled out a small knife. She handed it over, telling her to cut the dragon's tail, but she refused instantly. The next moment, her hair was yanked back. Angered by her refusal, she called her a useless slave who couldn't even do something that small right. She dragged her to the ground, and once again she found herself trapped in the same situation. I can't even protect this little thing. Please, tell me, what am I even living for? But in that moment of despair, her purple flames erupted, driving the children into a panic and forcing them to flee. Her eyes flutter open weakly, the gaze still clouded and unfocused, but once her vision clears, that hazy, unfocused look is replaced by swift panic. The last thing she remembered was locking eyes with a powerful gaze through the carriage window, but now she finds herself lying in bed beside a man she has never seen before. To make it worse, he casually asks if she's awake. Her panic gives way to confusion as he leans over her, making her wonder who he is and what is happening. Her eyes wander, carefully trace his features, sapphire blue eyes and long silver-white hair, the same as the dragon that came for her earlier that day. Then, could he be a dragonborn? In that moment, the only thought that crosses her mind is the need to escape, but with his weight pressing down on her, it's nearly impossible. He leans closer, his tongue brushing against her face as he declares that she isn't allowed to leave. The terrifying thought that she's about to be eaten flashes through her mind, and overwhelmed by the fear she passes out. He studies her, wondering if she has truly fainted. His gaze lingers on her before leaning in, licking the tears that settle in the corner of her eyes. He reflects with mild disappointment on how human tears hold no taste, unlike those of the Sea Clan, whose tears can at least turn into pearls. Still, because it's her, he decides he can forgive such a flaw. Lowering himself again, he inhales deeply, taking in her scent. A smile curves across his lips as he rests against her chest, thinking with satisfaction that, just as he expected, she smells wonderful. His hand trails gently along her cheek as he muses that when she wakes, he will tell her his name first. After that, he drifts straight into thought, picturing them together, he confessing his love to her with a bouquet in hand and she accepting his confession with rosy cheeks. And then naturally, well, get married. A sudden knock on the door pulls him out of his thoughts. Sitting straight on the bed, he tells him to speak if he had something to say, but Anthony just rubs his head in frustration, asking why he isn't putting on any clothes. Unbothered, he simply responds, telling him he's a dragon and dragons don't need any clothes, but Anthony, walking behind him, asks if he hadn't brought back a human. He tells him humans value etiquette, asking him to at least dress himself with jewels and fine clothes like they do, but Eric just glances back at him, irritation flashing in his eyes as he asks if that's all he came there to say. Anthony says no, he informs him the ogre clan is attacking again. He makes a sharp turn to him at once. Raising his spear so high and with one strike on the ground, he orders them to prepare for battle. Later that night, Pearl sits by the window side, her mind focused on how that dragon has been gone all day, so maybe that is her chance. Until a calm voice pulls her out of her thought. "Are you awake?" She turns to find him in his human form, his arms crossed, while staring at her intently. He steps forward and finally, with his knee pressing on the bed holding her jaw, he demands, "Say you love me." In the past they emptied buckets of water on her, claiming the curse on her has reigned the entire palace. After the disaster at the temple, she was imprisoned for a long time. When she stayed quiet, they whipped and cursed her. When she unleashed flames, their terrified screams echoed as they fled. A voice pulls her back to reality. "Human?" Eric, leaning in, their faces only a breath apart, asks her what she's thinking about. But she isn't over what he said before. Once his words become clear in her head, for her to say she loves him, she covers her mouth in terror, wondering what the Dragonborn is talking about, or at the very least what she's supposed to say. Then a thought crosses her mind: if she says something wrong, will he eat her? Just then, as if silencing the chaos in her mind, he yells enough, suggesting they get her something to eat first. As they walk, her blank stare lingers on him, confusion filling her mind as she wonders if he really is taking her to eat. The memory of the time she was locked away resurfaces. During the time she was locked away, nobody remembered that she needed food too. The unbearable hunger, the weakness spreading through her entire body, it finally became too much, and in a daze she burned the lock open. The kitchen maid on duty didn't recognize her. She simply assumed she was an ordinary child brought in by someone. Now as she trails quietly behind him, she can't help the thought that maybe the person in front of her isn't as terrifying as she thought. They arrive at the kitchen and he hands her raw meat to eat, retorting that it's delicious. Unease quickly settles in her mind once she realizes it's raw meat, and even worse, watching him lick the blood off so comfortably she can't help but shriek in terror. She wonders if it's human meat, if that was his way of threatening her. She realizes it was foolish of her to expect kindness from a bloodthirsty beast, but nevertheless, she clings to survival. Breaking her silence, she asks awkwardly if she can cook something for herself. Recalling her younger self in her weakest state, she thinks she wants to have a proper meal before the end. She tells herself to get it together, trembling all over as she bites her lips in agony. Suddenly, he stretches his hand toward her and, in a swift motion, wraps his arms around her, and with a calm steadiness in his tone he asks why she's trembling, or if by chance it's because she's scared. He wraps his arm around her, but what should have been a comforting gesture only heightens her fear. Terror presses down on her chest, and the thought of escape keeps creeping back into her mind. Each touch unsettles her further, and when he kisses her back, the fear sharpens into something close to panic. But as she squeezes her eyes shut, she sees the image of a young, lonely girl, and in that moment something shifts inside her. He notices she's stopped trembling. Baffled, he ponders on what she could possibly be afraid of, yet he doesn't dwell on it for too long, certain it must be because of him. Later, she carefully plates her meal and sets it on the dinner table. Seeing the dragonborn still sitting there, she wonders if perhaps he wants to try the food. From her peripheral vision, she spots him reaching to grab a piece with his bare hands. She catches on just in time and moves to stop him without thinking, but once the realization of what she's done hits her, she pulls away quickly. Still, she doesn't give up. Reaching calmly for a spoon, she casually mentions he should use a spoon. The next moment she asks him to open his mouth, holding a spoon to him. He's stuck in a momentary daze, shocked by the unexpected interaction, then he opens his mouth and takes the bite. He gulps it down and she stares at him cautiously, awaiting a review. She asks how it is, and the next moment he raises his head, wiping the corner of his mouth with his thumb as he comments that it's absolutely delicious. In the end, she ended up not taking a single bite out of the whole pot of food she made. He suddenly appears, arms slipping tightly around her waist as he asks if there's no more. She exhales in resignation, saying she'll go wash the dishes, but he only leans in closer, caging her in place, telling her to forget about that for now. Rather, he insists. She tells him she loves him. Her brows knit in confusion as she mutters faintly, but he's already lost in thought, debating aloud whether he should just say it first so she'll respond saying she loves him too. Without warning, his hands grip her face and his words fall with absolute certainty. I love you, human. Her mind spirals at those words, and in that instant, memories of the cuts and the pain flood back. The power surges out of her, betraying her intention. Purple flames erupt violently around her. A few minutes later, Anthony bursts into the room, his voice sharp as he demands to know what's happening and why the castle's magic circle has suddenly activated. His eyes fall on Eric, seated with unsettling calm, and Pearl trembling on the floor. Irritation rises in his throat as he asks if this is her divine power, and if she still hasn't learned to control it. But before he can continue, Eric's voice cuts through the air, cold and commanding. Enough. Eric rises and steps outside, leaving Pearl behind. Tears blur her vision as she stares down at her own trembling hands, like she's committed a great sin. The crushing thought that that is the end for her, she'll surely face the death penalty, leaves her heart aching. However, before the despair can fully consume her, a gentle voice slips into the silence, calm through all the tension. It suggests she should go to him, because, in all the stories he's read, that is how it always unfolds. She stares in confusion, until Anthony, wearing a bright smile, opts to explain. He asks if she still doesn't understand, explaining that Eric is the sole heir of the dragon clan, and that he even defied his own people just to bring her here. The words strike her, and caught in the moment, she pushes herself to her feet, agreeing with Anthony silently. Rather than wasting time overthinking, there's no better option in that moment than to act. Anthony's gaze follows her as she hurries toward the door. The moment it closes behind her, he folds his arms across his chest, wearing a proud smile as he murmurs his final words like a decree, "Congratulations, you're now the bride of the dragon clan." She hurries down the stairs, when her gaze briefly lifts to the portrait hanging on the wall, and almost instantly, a conversation replays in her mind. "He genuinely likes you and he wants to marry you as his bride. It's just 3 simple words, I love you, say it and he'll give you everything." Her brows furrow together as a single question eats at her thoughts. Why? Why does he like me? This love, it came out of nowhere, without reason, with no reason to believe in it. When she finally finds him, he's seated by the window, the fading light casting sharp shadows across his face. Her breath catches, eyes widening in shock as his voice slices through the silence. The first words she hears are a startling confession, that he feels as though he could devour her whole right now. A heartbeat later, his tone snaps, as he reminds her that when he left, what she should have done was come to find him immediately, not wait behind speaking to Anthony about meaningless things. Her voice trembles as she tries to explain, saying Anthony was only telling her about him, but he cuts through her excuse with a single command, "Come." Hesitant, she moves toward him, each step dragging heavier than the last until she finally stands before him. Without warning, he sweeps her up into his arms, his hold firm and possessive, his voice dropping low, as he tells her that if she wants to know anything about him, she should ask him directly. After that, he asks her to lay down and stay with him a bit more, mentioning he's sleepy. Later, as they lie in bed together, her gaze lingers on him. Her thoughts spiral as her hand traces lightly along his face. "Eric, you're the first. Even after being burned by my black flames, you still dared to come close to me. This feeling. It's so strange." Eventually, her exhaustion takes over, and she drifts into sleep, her breathing soft and steady. Beside her, Eric's eyes slowly open. For a moment, he simply watches her, taking in how soundly she sleeps, but then his attention shifts. His gaze lands on her ruined clothes, and a flicker of annoyance passes through him. It's uncomfortable holding her like this. His brow tightens further when he realizes it's the dress she was meant to wear to someone else. Irritation rises in his chest, and in one swift motion, he tears the fabric apart. Propping his head against his hand, he stares at her with satisfaction. "Let's change it right now." As his fingers move with precision, unfastening the buttons of her dress, a faint restlessness stirs within her, her body suddenly feels itchy. When her eyes finally flutter open, the first thing she sees is him watching her with genuine curiosity. A low murmur escapes his lips, perfect timing, he remarks as he lifts a long bra-like undergarment with a puzzled look, admitting he doesn't know how to put it on. She blinks in a daze, her mind still clouded from sleep, too slow to register what's happening. Then, realization strikes, and she springs upright in a flurry, apologizing quickly, explaining that she's only just woken up and still feels groggy. But before she can fully gather herself, the dress he hadn't yet put on for her slips down her shoulder, sending her into panic. She bows her head, pleading for her clothes back, but he just casually tells her he tore them off cause they were in the way. "Did we skip something, guys?" "What way?" Her heart skips, panic rising, but before she can react, he raises the undergarment again and asks innocently how it's supposed to be worn. Flustered, she tries to snatch it from his hand, but he dodges with ease, and in the next moment, she falls into his arms. Her head pressed firmly against his body, heat flooding her cheeks as she lowers her voice, embarrassed, finally confessing that it's an undergarment. He tells her he's got it now, and with a teasing smile he repeats the question, this time with pure knowledge, "So, how do you wear it?" Just then, a sudden knock echoes against the door, Anthony's voice following immediately as he calls for Eric, warning that he'll enter in 3 seconds. By the time he reaches 2, Eric vanishes from her side without a trace. Left alone, she scrambles for the sheet and wraps it tightly around herself, seizing the brief chance to escape, but just as she moves, a small figure blocks her path, a little elf, who introduces itself as Muddle, Anthony's companion. She stares at it in awe, her admiration slipping out before she can stop herself, and the elf accepts it with a proud smile. With a calm certainty, Muddle tells her he believes Prince Eric will show her everything she longs to see. Then lastly, it asks her a question that makes her freeze on the spot. What does she desire most right now? Her chest tightens, teeth sinking into her lower lip painfully as she ponders on the question. What does she want? She wants to go home. But it wasn't so simply. If she returned, would anyone even be there waiting for her? Once she's gathered herself, the elf leads her quietly to the dining hall. She peeks in first, hesitant, but her presence is instantly noticed by Rhodey, who waves at her with an easy smile. She steps inside awkwardly, gripping her dress with shy fingers, but Eric's gaze immediately locks onto her. His expression shifts, stunned and mesmerized by the sight before him. Without hesitation, he pulls her against him and tells her she looks beautiful. When they're only a breath apart, he admits in a low whisper that he's hungry but he wants to eat something she makes. Flustered, she hurries away at once. Rhodey scoffs sitting across from him, lets out a scoff taunting him with his words. Even after memorizing all those etiquette lessons, Eric still acts too recklessly. He calls him rude, pointing out how frightened the lady looked. Eric, however, just shoots him a cold glance, his word maintaining the same level of coldness as he asks if he also wants a beating. Rhodey switches up in an instant, his sassiness quickly changing to panic as he pleads to be let off. Eric rises up, then as he adjusts his sleeves with deliberate calm, he urges them to listen. He suddenly brings up the ogres, assuming they should lay low for a while, then following with precise certainty, he declares his decision to hold a wedding with this human. Later, in private, Anthony speaks with sly amusement, carefully phrasing his words as he asks Eric whether he's already consummated the marriage with her. He even presses further, asking what it felt like, doing it with a human girl. Eric, however, only folds his arms, confusion flickering across his face, his response simple, "Consummate? What does that mean?" Rhodey nearly chokes, coughing his food onto the table while Anthony only stares at him in dead silence. Flustered, Rhodey shoots up from his seat, demanding if Eric truly doesn't know after everything, going so far to bring her here, to marry her, so how could he say he doesn't know that? But before the tension can build further, she enters, balancing a tray carefully in her hands. She approaches him timidly, ready to set the meal before him, but Eric simply leans back in his chair, eyes fixed on her, and tells her to do as she did yesterday, to feed him. Rhodey groans, shoving Anthony forward in protest, pouting like a child. "Seriously? You can't even eat by yourself now?" Unbothered, the prince takes her hand instead, guiding it toward his lips, while she sits frozen, her expression flustered and uncertain. Beyond the hall, a few dragons gather, peering in through the window, whispers filling the hall as they observe her. "So that's the human girl? She looks so weak, like I could crush her with one hand." A bead of sweat trickles down her cheek as the presence of so many dragons sends shivers through her body, terrifying her. As if he notices, Eric using his thumb carefully wipes the tears settling on her eyelashes as he reassures her, asking her to not be afraid, he's there after all. Her cheeks flush at his reassurance, the fear in her chest slowly fading away, replaced by something warmer. The thought clinging to her, is he protecting me? When she finishes, he tells her there's somewhere he wants to show her. Moments later, he takes her with him, his hands steady around hers, leading her forward. As she follows, her thoughts spiral restlessly. What am I to him? He tells me not to be scared, gives me clothes, makes sure I eat. Am I just his personal food reserve? Her head shakes slightly, disbelief tugging at her. I must be going crazy, but, strangely enough, I don't feel as afraid anymore. Suddenly, his voice breaks through her thoughts. He orders her to step back. The air shifts, thick with power, and in the next instant, he forces the door open with his ability. Once they step inside, she looks around and wonders what kind of place this is. The air is biting cold, and instinctively, she clings closer to him for warmth while Eric simply watches her with quiet satisfaction, a faint smile tugging at his lips. With a simple motion, he stirs the air, and the chill vanishes in an instant. Startled, she pulls away almost immediately, but his hand shoots out, pulling her back firmly against him. His breath grazes her ear as he whispers, asking why she's pulling away. Flustered, she stammers that she thought he didn't like being that close. He tilts her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes, and asks in a low voice, "Who said that?" His tone softens a moment later as he tells her to stay here for now, assuring her the place is safe and no dragon will date trespass. Turning away, he mentions he has other things to do. Pointing towards some jars in the corner, he instructs her to coat them with oil, assuring her she doesn't have to be perfect about it, those others wouldn't even notice the difference anyway. Then he steps out, leaving her behind. Outside, his mind drifts back to Anthony's sly question about whether he'd consummated the marriage with her, a human girl. His fingers support his jaw as he murmurs to himself, recalling what he'd read in books. Consummation, it's supposed to be passionate, fierce, almost like a collision. His eyes narrow slightly, a shadow crossing them as he wonders, but with her delicate body, can she even withstand me? Meanwhile, Pearl moves quietly across the room. Her eyes land on an egg, one she swears had shifted before. She leans closer to inspect it, and just like she thought she'd seen, the egg suddenly jerks, hopping right in front of her. She gasps, startled, barely steadying it in her hands before another egg drops down. Heart pounding, she scrambles and manages to catch it as well. With a deep breath, she places both gently on the ground, determined to coat each one carefully and evenly. But at that tender moment her flames stir, surging beyond her control, her face twists in horror. In the library, Rhodey leans close to Anthony, asking if he too could bring someone back just like the prince did, adding that he didn't mind if it was even a beast folk. With a mischievous smirk, he rested an arm on him and confessed that he wanted to consummate and lay dragon eggs. Looking at him with wide, almost childlike eyes, he asks Anthony's thoughts, but Anthony only shoves him away coldly. With a snap of his fingers, a magic circle appeared beneath Rhodey, shrinking him down to the form of a child. Answering his question, Anthony explains that he was only helping him remember who he really was, reminding him that as long as no new dragons were born, he would always remain the youngest hatchling of their clan. With a scoff, Anthony mocked him further, just a little fledgling daring to dream about consummation and laying dragon eggs. Frustrated, Rhodey yells in anger and even threatening to kill him, he leaps onto his shoulder in an attempt to bite his head. But before the situation could spiral further, the prince enters the library. With an almost casual air, he picks Rhodey up by his tail and instructs him to put some clothes on, reminding Anthony that he was there to discuss serious matters. As soon as Rhodey exits, the prince, wasting no time, directly asks how consummation worked. Brushing his hand over the books arranged on the shelf, he remarks that he's so eager to ask, but consummation isn't always a good thing, asking what'll happen if she can't lay a dragon egg. He briefs him through it. If she fails to produce eggs after consummation, she can't fulfill the elders' expectations, and if that happens. Before he can finish, the prince snaps, releasing an insane amount of his power, destroying the surroundings as he insists that has nothing to do with her. He declares afterwards that she doesn't need to lay dragon eggs, nor does she need to reproduce. At the same time, Pearl clutches the eggs close to her chest, but the flames surrounding her grow uncontrollable. Just her brows furrow in worry once the realization that if her flames were to keep going on like that it'll burn the eggs jolt from her arms, one of them flying straight toward the fire. Back in the library, the prince slams Anthony against the shelves, his hand tightening around his throat. His voice was low and fierce as he confessed that he had wanted her for over a decade, and now, no one could take her from him, not the elders, not even Anthony himself. Anthony, struggling to breathe, urges him to calm down, until finally the prince releases his grip. Regaining composure, Anthony suggests that if she wanted to see her family, the prince should simply bring them here, but the prince refuses immediately, insisting her family had mistreated her. Anthony simply responded saying that was even better, suggesting he could bring them here and make them pay, assuring the prince that she would certainly like that. On the other hand, Pearl counts the eggs to see if they're complete. She crouches down trembling, wondering what she should do now that they have so many cracks, until she hears someone's footstep approaching and she turns around too. At the same time the eggs quickly flee, but before she can process anything further the prince pushes the door open asking her to come out, saying he already figured something out, but upon noticing her states he pauses mid-sentence. He immediately rushes to her asking what happened, why she's crying. He asks her if she's hurt, asking her to let him see, but she just says no, she isn't. He pulls her into a tight hug the next minute, softly comforting her. He asks her not to cry, saying when she does, it makes him want to kill. But even in his embrace she remains in doubt. Was he worried about her, or is he simply giving her a warning? The eggs tap gently behind her as she recalls her mother's teachings. Crying doesn't solve anything, and avoiding it and hiding will only make her angrier. She clenches her fist, a way of releasing the ache in her chest as she resigns. Maybe he hates weakness too. She presents the egg to him. Then, keeping her head low, she presses her eyes shut, unable to meet his gaze as she explains that her flames opened up so many cracks on the egg. Her apology rings throughout the room while he just watched her in stunned silence. At last, his hand comes to rest on the egg. His tone is steady, almost dismissive, as he asks why she's apologizing for something so trivial. So what if it cracked? He questions, spinning the egg effortlessly on his fingertip. He reminds her that those eggs haven't hatched in centuries, so what does it matter if cracks appear now? Her panic rises and she pleads with him to stop, insisting that if he continues, the egg might truly break. She snatches it back, wrapping her arms around it with a protective, almost maternal embrace. His eyes linger on the sight of her, and in that stillness, his mind drifts. He recalls the book Anthony had pressed into his hands, the one about consummation, urging him to read it for himself. The words come back to him now. Consummation, it spoke of it as a way of devouring, of becoming one with the other. For humans, it is what they must do to acknowledge their love. His hand moves, slipping around her waist as he leans closer, his gaze locking with hers, and in a quiet, yet casual tone, he admits his jealousy, pointing out that she's never held him with the same seriousness she shows that egg. He leans forward, but she dodges his advance, her thoughts spiraling in disbelief. He's jealous of an egg? The absurdity mixes with the fear trembling through her, but he doesn't stop. His grip tightens, his hand seizing her jaw, forcing her to meet his eyes. Wait for me, Pearl, his thoughts echo like a vow, heavy and unshakable. I'll give you the gift you desire. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I can't wait to see what you think. Also, I've been seeing you guys' comments, and it's not that I don't want to make a part 2 for the previous videos, it's just they aren't really quick with the uploads. I'm so sorry guys. Thank you for your patience, you guys are the best supporters for real.